Hey Ben, I think you're muted, but
Hey, Mackensie. Okay.
hey, sounds good. Sorry, you're on a call.
Okay, bye. Yeah, we're just wrapping up some stuff. Oh, been a long day, and it's not the final call as well. So, okay, so
It's late for you. 8 p.m. for you guys, isn't it? So you're a year after. You're
almost
hour.
8 p.m.
Yeah.
Almost 8 p.m. Wait, let me also connect my microphone. All right.
Definitely look the most professional of us all with the mic.
That's because everyone else has much more impressive titles. So I have to look professional. You're a CEO of a company. It doesn't matter, but people are gonna listen.
Yeah. So, can you hear me? Let me see if it switched to the. Yeah, it did. Okay, so now let me close the door.
We'll still have to wait.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Ashley.
How's it going?
How you doing?
That's a great view behind you.
It's Miami.
Yeah.
Oh, Miami Beach, or?
I'm actually in Brickell.
I've been in Miami last time, I think 5-6 years ago.
Awesome.
But I went. I have some Brazilian relatives in there, like distant relatives, and they took me to Fogo de Chão in there. And
I love it.
I had, I think, a 14-hour flight back home, and I wasn't hungry for the entire flight. So I finished my trip with a great experience. But next time I want to see some alligators.
You know, I've lived here. I've only lived here for about 2 years, but I've still never been to the Everglades yet.
I have.
I have been to Fogo de Chão. Absolutely.
There you have it.
Yeah, I must like to eat.
We actually went there on a trip and we did not see alligators. We expected them, but we didn't see them. So the fact that you weren't there doesn't mean you can still see the alligator someplace else, I guess.
By the way, first of all, of course we'll cut the small talk in the recording, hopefully.
No, I will.
But in any case, keep in mind that this is also recorded, and we will share the recording with you, so you can use that as well. And you know, a lot of people like me don't like to join live, because then I can listen to it on double speed or something. So. So let's see.
Guys,
and I have the questions ready, so that's a good thing. I just need to find it.
Was there a compiled list of the questions in the end? I don't know if I saw just the final run of them.
Yeah, so I can send. I just placed them in one place. I can send it to you.
It's not the end of the world.
Same document.
I can send it right now. I'll send it over mail. Can you send it? I'll send it.
It's the same.
Send it over Slack.
The same one I created.
No. I just ordered them and stuff. Let's see.
So yeah, sure. Is it on Slack, Ben?
I just sent you over Slack, and Eldad is asking which Zoom you should join. So I think it's this one. I hope that the attendees are also familiar with the right link. Oh, there's Eldad. I sent you the.
I just have 2 invites, I guess. One is in as a panelist, one is in an attendee.
Yeah, okay, so...
I actually copied the panelist to the second one, so we'll have it in both places, so nobody can make a mistake.
Okay, and I think this week I reached...
morning.
This week I think I reached a record of incoming SDR calls. I don't know if it's the season or... But I had... Wow. Yeah, even one during the all hands. I got a private number, Then afterwards, I got an email. I couldn't catch you, so.
And then when you don't answer the email, you also get a LinkedIn. Hi, Karen, I sent you and Tamar an email.
I was so careful not to let anyone scan my badge at RSA this year, and I'm still getting like 30 like, oh, you popped by our booth. It's like, no, I did not. I was certain that I did not.
So something I wanted to do is go to RSA or one of these places and go and get scanned in each and every booth and release like a report of like what like from 1,000 or 500 companies, how many emails did I get in the first day? How many, like what happens to someone who actually gets scanned for everything? All right.
By the way, guys, since I'm not a panelist, I'm going to stay with you to see that everything works well, and then I'm going to disconnect.
Okay.
Otherwise,
Let's and we have a missing person.
yeah, Mollie
Breen.
Let's give her. I already sent her an email.
Oh, okay.
Mackensie,
So
I
I will
sent
not.
you an email too. Did you see it just now?
What?
No, Mackensie, I sent you an email now.
Oh yeah, I did see that. Yep. Thanks for that.
No problem.
Okay, and Karen, did you send them the questions?
Yeah, that's the
Oh, okay, cool. And the reason I'm not pausing the recording
I know the reason.
is that a few months ago, I had a discussion panel with one of our partners, with CockroachDB. And because we logged on earlier and started small talking, I paused the recording and noticed that in the last minute of the webinar. So I'm not pausing anything anymore.
I had a similar problem. I was doing a webinar. We had 500 people register for it. It was one of the biggest that we had of the year. I was so stoked. And then we were using a platform called Crowdcast, and it just didn't work. The attendees could hear us, but they could just see white. And we just couldn't get it to working, and then it was it was a nightmare. Needless to say, we're not using Crowdcast anymore.
Now we have it live. Let's broadcast this on. So
hey, Karen, did you send me the list of questions as well?
Yes.
Hi, Mollie.
I did.
So sorry.
Let me check if it's the right Ashley, but yeah.
So I don't think, by the way, I sent you, like Karen sent you the questions. I don't think we will get to all of them. If this is a healthy discussion, we shouldn't be getting to all of them. So,
yeah.
But
actually, this is your email, so maybe check the spam. I see that it was sent.
All right, thank you.
Ashley, where are your offices? It looks sunny and nice out there.
Looks like Miami.
It is Miami. But we're headquartered in Southern California.
That explains.
Such nice places.
Where are you?
And we also have an office in Basingstoke in the UK, which is awful if you've never been there.
Mollie, where are you located?
Based? Yeah.
I'm in Washington, D.C. on East Coast. You know.
We're in DC.
Let's see. If you're familiar with DC, I am downtown, and I'm in how DC is quadrants. I'm in the northwest quadrant, near DuPont.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, I'm going to log off and join as an attendee. Have fun and enjoy the discussion.
Thank you.
Bye
Thanks,
for now.
Karen.
No problem.
Was anybody at RSA last week, or everyone?
Oh,
Yeah. I was there.
I think I finally got over the jet lag this morning. I think stopped feeling like every morning I was waking up, it was in the middle of the night as of today.
Where are you based, Mollie?
Washington, D.C.
Washington.
Yeah.
That's jet lag light.
Yeah. Exactly. And also, I'm like, if you're just tired all the time, there's no such thing as jet lag. Like, you're just tired all the time. So, yeah.
I'm heading over to London as soon as I get off this webcast. I got to head to the airport.
Can you fly direct from Miami?
Yeah, absolutely. You can from LA as well. It's
Well, yeah.
it's only like a 1 hour extra flight distance to fly from LA to London versus Miami to London.
Really?
It's crazy, right? You think it'd be so much further, but I guess Miami's so far south that yeah.
How far is how long's the flight?
9 hours from here. It's 10 from LA.
Wow. I would have,
Mhm.
sorry, it is maybe 5 hours and four, like it is cheaper to fly, or not cheaper, I'm sorry, shorter to fly to LA from DC than it is to San Francisco.
Yeah.
Like 5 hours and 40 minutes or something. I had no idea it was that different. Now I got to look at the map.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are rookie numbers.
Yeah. You guys are in Tel Aviv, are you?
Yeah, in Tel Aviv. So a common flight is Tel Aviv to San Francisco, which is about 15 hours. And then when you arrive, it's right before the airport starts. So you have like half an hour to wait in the airplane.
Wow.
But it's direct. So overall, it's a good flight.
Yeah. Yeah. You guys, you probably get really used to the 15-hour, 12-hour, type of flight distance.
I'd rather have one of those long haul flights than like a flight to London is 5.5 hours. I hate those because that's like
sleep. Yeah.
It's not a short flight, but it's also not a flight where you can just go to sleep or something. So
Yeah.
it's just long and boring.
Mm-hmm.
I come from New Zealand, so whenever I go home, it's about 19 hours, or I think 19 is probably the best that you can get from Amsterdam to New Zealand. Is about 19 hours of travel. So that's like always just hell. And then you get there and it's always like 7 a.m. and you have to stay up all day.
Wow. I think the longest flight I've ever done was 12 hours. No, I'm trying to think if I've done anything longer than 12. So
Yeah, I think the longest that you can do is 17.
okay.
And so and pretty much when you go into New Zealand, like everything goes through Singapore. So
Mm.
like it's always there. There's very few direct flights. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think we'll just start. So hi everybody. Thanks for joining me, both attendees and the panelists. We'll have a fun discussion today about securing healthcare data, and let's get some things. Let's get started. Sorry, been a long day. So I'm Ben. I'm VP Marketing of Satori, and we have some great panelists. They'll introduce themselves in a while. Today we'll have an interesting discussion with these folks about different angles relating to securing healthcare data. And while I have questions that I wrote down, feel free to suggest additional questions using Zoom, and that way I can ask them if we have time. And a word to our panelists, I will be asking questions round robin, so each of you will get a question, but do feel free to make it a discussion. I think we'd rather have an interesting discussion than having all the questions answered. So let's make it interactive, let's make this conversational, and let's enjoy this, and hope it's interesting to everybody. So I will ask you to give a brief introduction about yourself, but also about your company, what it does. Let's start with you, Mollie.
Great. My name is Mollie, and I am the CEO and founder of Perygee. And Perygee is an IoT OT security platform. And so we work with healthcare companies and we help them get the inventory of all of the devices on their network, and then be able to implement the security controls and best practices around those medical devices and some of those even more finicky devices like HVAC that you may or may not know about.
Awesome. Ashley, you're up next.
Hi. Yeah, hello. I'm Ashley Leonard. I'm CEO and founder of Syxsense. We're a unified security and endpoint management vendor. We help our customers in healthcare detect all their different types of endpoints and then be able to patch and secure them with proactive policies.
Mackensie?
Hello, everyone. So my name is Mackensie. I'm a security and developer advocate at GitGuardian, which is a code security company. Before that, I was the founder and CTO of a health tech organization called Compago, which is still based out of Australia today.
All right. And last but not least, Eldad?
Hey everyone, I'm Eldad Chai. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Satori. Satori is a data security platform that enables frictionless and secure access to data. We work with financial, healthcare, tech companies that are very data-driven, but their data is sensitive. They want to protect that, and we help make that data available in an easy, frictionless way with all the security and compliance policies built in. Yeah, great to be here.
Okay, so I will start with a question. This one I will ask each and every one of you because I think it's bridging this introduction into the discussion. Let's start with you, Mollie, again. So what is your company doing in this field that is helping healthcare organizations protect their data?
So we see a lot of things through an IoT, Internet of Things, IOMT, Internet of Medical Things. If we're in the healthcare sector, we see everything through that lens. And IoT, IOMT has created a lot of, I would say, fragmentation in the sense that whereas data may used to have just lived on a computer and go live in some type of server, now it's living in a glucose monitor on someone's body and getting transmitted to a phone and somewhere else. So a lot of what we're doing around data security and specifically around IoT and IOMT is helping to understand what those data flows are between devices and how they're communicating and how data is moving along them, and just making that visible so that they can understand how that works, and then being able to put in policies like segmentation so that certain things aren't able to talk to one another and share data if they're not supposed to, or being able to alert if something is talking to something that it shouldn't be, and help organizations be able to understand those types of changes in their network as well.
Okay, Mackensie?
Yeah, so what GitGuardian does is we're really focused on code security and making sure that sensitive information doesn't leak through code. And so the question of, why should healthcare organizations really care about this or understand this? And the reality is that in this day and age, every organization is a tech organization. Every organization has to deal with data and code. So every organization, including healthcare, needs to be aware of these risks and understand the implications that it can have and how your sensitive information can potentially be accessed by threat actors. So we're working in the health tech space and also in the healthcare space to ensure organizations don't leak any sensitive information that could lead to data about clients, patients, or anything else leaking into the wrong hands and keeping all their applications secure.
Right. Ashley?
Yes. So as I said earlier, Syxsense is a unified security and endpoint management vendor. And so what that means for healthcare is that we help our healthcare customers identify everything that's actually connected to the network, be able to actually collect asset data on those devices, and then run vulnerability scans on them And we're doing that from two different aspects. One is the ability to scan the software, operating systems, firmware, third-party applications that might be installed on those devices, but also scan it for security configuration vulnerabilities as well. Because we then are linked to this management engine, we can then leverage our management engine to go ahead and actually not just report on the security vulnerabilities, but actually help our customers remediate them. But remediate them on their terms, because obviously in healthcare, it's absolutely critical, right? You can't be in the middle of surgery and then have a medical device start doing an update and reboot itself. So the ability to kind of control how that's done is absolutely critical as well.
Right. And Eldad?
I love the different perspectives on securing
that's
healthcare.
what I wanted
That's
to
really
say.
interesting. Yeah, yeah, I'd love to share how we make an impact. So over the past, let's say 5 years, it's for healthcare organization, it became clearer and clearer that their path for innovation success go through data enablement. Just the decisions you need to make, the products you need to deliver, like the critical path go through how can you utilize the data that you have, whether you're a hospital and you have all this healthcare treatment data that you can leverage to provide better healthcare, or over the past 3 years, a lot of investment from VCs went to health tech companies like the one Mackensie founded. And many of these are basically data analytics companies. And when you think about what needs to happen for a company to be innovative with data, it basically boils down to how many people can use it. How, do they have the data they need to make decisions? That goes against everything we believe in security, right? You want to have, put data in a vault and nobody can access, and call the guard for the key if you want to access that. That has been a challenge for companies that want to innovate, and we're kind of tackling this challenge up front. The way we helped and continue to help healthcare organizations to unlock that data, make it easily accessible. Everyone can find and use the data that they need, but making sure it's secure. So it's a kind of a challenge, a big one to tackle, but that's what we decided to do, and it's been great seeing how healthcare organizations can grow their innovation by leveraging our technology.
Right. So what Eldad started saying before, I've been in this cybersecurity space for quite some time. And it's always great to see how wide it is and how deep it is. So many different angles of looking at helping this specific industry be safe while innovating. So Mackensie, what are some of the biggest security risks that healthcare organizations are facing?
Yeah, there's a lot of security risks in here because healthcare organizations are facing the similar risks that everyone else is, right? You're looking at ransomware. They're being targeted by organized hacking groups to disrupt and also expose data. But then there's other layers of risks that healthcare organizations face that others don't, because it's a heavily scrutinized area where you have lots of compliance issues, where now if you have reputational damage and you have financial damage that all organizations have, but layered on top of that, specifically in healthcare, you now have compliance issues, which can affect your ability to operate, to continue functioning. So the risks are kind of multifaceted. And a lot of the risks have been really, truly accelerated in how fast we've moved into this tech world and how quickly people need to catch up. A healthcare organization, that's a wide brush, but speaking generally, the most important thing of them is caring for their patients, making sure that they're providing great healthcare. Now they need to be security experts as well. Now they need to be tech experts as well and understand how all this goes. So the security risks that healthcare organizations are facing are the same as everyone else, plus the additional layers that they specifically need to deal with. So I just really loved what Satori is doing and dealing with that, because these security risks are preventing the healthcare industry from innovating. I know this from the point of view of growing a health tech startup where you have great technology that can help create so many of the goals, but the security risks of relinquishing that data and allowing, another organization to have access to it so that it can innovate with it is too much of a concern. So these are kind of some of the security risks and some of the limitations that we're really dancing around, particularly in the healthcare space. I'm not sure if anyone else wants to add on to what I had and provide maybe some more specifics around that.
Well, Mackensie, I'll add that you're like one observation that we've had is there's definitely no shortage of risks, especially within the healthcare sector. Like take all the risks that people have to worry about and then just add a whole nother layer of risks that you have to think about in healthcare because we're dealing with patient outcomes. And I think that when I put myself in the shoes of somebody who is looking across all of these risks, one of the biggest challenges that is both a risk in and of itself is just how hard it is to prioritize in any given day. Do I, put up as many walls as possible to prevent against ransomware? Do I try to be as micro segmented around our network or really fine-grained permissions around data? And it gets really hard to try to sift through how to prioritize that. And it's definitely not one size fits all. It's not like there's, we can, sit around and tabletop the right way to go across these things that's going to work for every single organization. It really requires people with deep understanding of their business and the people within it and what they're trying to accomplish to figure out then how do we start to chip away at some of these risks. And that's a really big, a big risk in and of itself, just in how you manage it.
I would add as well that kind of beyond that as well, that if you look at the infrastructure of healthcare by its very nature, right, it's geographically dispersed in many cases. It's not just protecting an office building, right? You're protecting, sure, a hospital, but then there's remote clinics, there's remote at-home healthcare as well. So that creates its own set of challenges. So the traditional way of protecting IT infrastructure, putting a big firewall around kind of the crown jewels is almost impossible in a healthcare environment. And then added to that, the way that the devices within healthcare themselves are actually used is typically not by a single user, right? You've got a medical device. That device is used by a whole group of different people as well. So who's responsible for that device as well? So just the very nature of healthcare itself makes it unique. And obviously, if a ransomware does happen, the impact to the hospital's operations and to the patients themselves has very, very serious outcomes, right? I mean, there's cases I think last year there was a hospital in Alabama that got a ransomware attack and there were deaths directly tied to what actually happened there. So the impact of this is incredibly serious.
Okay. Eldad, you wanted to add something or are you good?
No, I did, but I think I love the perspective. We can move on. I think we covered really covered this topic really well.
Okay, so yeah, I think that when in healthcare, sometimes like disruption of service, for example, can turn into disruption of life. So that's like in many cases, I'm very happy that I'm not, doing something that might have such dire consequences. And so, Mollie, I'll make a statement and feel free to say that it's not true, but health tech is going through a growing phase with lots of innovation right now. If so, can you give me a couple of examples of such innovations that are actually creating security risks or compliance risks?
I'll to answer your question, the statement is true. And I think it was Mackensie that alluded to this early on about we've seen this huge rush. I've seen this huge rush of innovation, and I think a lot of it was accelerated through the pandemic. So an example of I remember early days in the pandemic working with hospitals and them talking about implementing wireless thermostat so that they could take patients' temperatures without having to be in the room, and paying extra close attention to things like HVAC and zero pressure rooms, so that air that had that patients who were infected with COVID couldn't get out to the rest of the hospital. So those are some examples of some exciting innovation that isn't going to go anywhere and has just been accelerated because of the pandemic. But how does this, then your follow-up question was, how does this create risks? Well, unfortunately, I've seen it through both lens. One, a lot of these devices weren't built with security in mind. And there's a lot of work that's happening on a regulation side to actually start to put and regulate more security for when these devices are made. And that's awesome, but we're a long way away from 100% of any hospital's inventory to, be made in this post 2023 world where there's been some regulation. There's a lot of equipment and devices out there that have been around for 10 or 15 years, and they've probably got another 10 or 15 years left in them. And so that's going to create real security risks in the sense that we aren't able to secure them through that way. And then I've seen other big security vulnerabilities then be just around then not even knowing what's on their network, and the ability that even if these things were secure by design, there's still a lack, which they aren't, but even if they were, there'd still be a lack of understanding and sense, just because when we talk about hospitals in particular, they're very dynamic. So something like a ventilator, which got moved around a ton with COVID patients, like coming in and out, we were talking about dispersed locations. Those are a great example of things that are really hard to track and keep in mind of where they are. And if you don't know where they are, it's really hard to put security controls around them.
Anyone else about the healthcare innovations that are causing additional security compliance risks?
I think generally when the industry moves fast and there's a lot of innovation, security plays catch up. So in one way, it's great for cybersecurity companies, but it is a risk, and it's always like that when there's a big, business, in this case, human kind of factor coming in, driving these companies, organizations to innovate. That's a good thing, right? Their goal is to save lives, and that's a noble cause. But then, security, as Mollie mentioned, is an afterthought and not embedded. There's two ways to do that. Either, mandate that you're going to add security from the get-go, assuming that doesn't slow down innovation, or you're part of the innovation, you're part of the enablement. So, and I think that's where it gets exciting for, companies like the companies we have on the panel here, where the way we're thinking about cybersecurity is an enablement factor for that innovation. It's not about, hey, stop what you're doing and we'll figure out how you're going to deal with it, but more like, continue what you're doing, do it faster, because we're going to mitigate all the other risks that you have. So I love that perspective.
I kind of want to add an answer from kind of the other side. Back in Incapago, when we were, the innovators created a security risk. And I'm not saying that we were, but let's just say from that side, it's interesting because we're dealing in an area where people have lots of different motivations, and security, at least a few years ago, wasn't at the forefront. There was boxes that you needed to tick to ensure data was safe, and then the language that really got conversations moving in terms of potential were around kind of effective cost savings and area. And so when you're from that kind of perspective and you're really leaning onto that becomes the most important narrative, and everything that you focus on is that healthcare organizations are typically underfunded. They're typically, depending on what you're talking about. So you're bringing them to a solution that can provide cost benefits, savings, or additional areas. From that's the conversation that you lean on. And I feel like that's how a lot of some of these security risks can actually enter into an organization. The fact that there's just kind of, once you tick a few boxes, the conversations don't typically go deeper than that. And from the security perspective, putting on my GitGuardian hat now, that's the kind of conversations that really need to be pushed from that perspective, and the questions need to be answered exactly how, when you're bringing in new technology, how you're going to add layers of security and not be a kind of vulnerability or a weakness.
I think also with innovation, right, you've got so many disparate systems that need to talk to each other. So that within a healthcare environment makes life very, very challenging. Then you add on to that kind of wearable devices. We're actually bringing technology to the customer, and you've got to secure that as well. So I think there's a ton of innovation going on, but that's creating a ton of challenges as well. And that's without even touching on things like AI and what that's going to do to healthcare, and the implications to data with the large language models, and you can have data leakage from a healthcare environment into one of these data models that potentially could create a huge exposure for various healthcare organizations. We were chatting just a little earlier about RSA, which is a big IT security conference in San Francisco last week, and there was a lot of conversations that were going on there related to kind of data ownership in a kind of AI world as well. So I think we haven't even seen the full impact. It's just beginning, the impact of AI. So innovation is changing so rapidly, but then you have to counter that, I think, to Mollie's point earlier, that sometimes healthcare organizations can actually be slow to adopt technology or refresh technology because what they have now is working. And we frequently see within healthcare environments, endpoints running kind of very out-of-date operating systems like Windows 7. In the UK, which is where I'm from originally, there was a huge healthcare breach in the National Health Service that was related to devices that were running Windows 7, which is not supported by Microsoft anymore. They're not being patched anymore. So that itself actually creates huge security vulnerabilities as well.
So Ashley, when you're seeing when we're speaking about such sensitive data that may get leaked, what are some of the most significant challenges you're seeing that healthcare organizations are facing when they need to secure this sensitive data? Mostly, of course, other than other industries.
Yeah, well, by the nature of what the data it is, I think is huge, right? So it's one thing if you've got financial data, because what's the harm with that? It's limited to money. If you're talking about medical records, the harm to that is massive, and very personal, of course. There was a breach, I think, last year in Australia, where ransomware was deployed to a major healthcare insurer. But obviously now with ransomware, they don't only encrypt data, but they exfiltrate the data as well. And then you've got the threat of that data being shared publicly. And in the case in Australia, I know a number of medical records were actually put onto the dark web. You can imagine, the impact of people's lives of having that personal medical data now being published on the internet or the dark web. So the data itself is yeah, it's a whole different level of confidentiality that we have to deal with in the healthcare world.
Anyone wants to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I know the breach you're referring to, and one of the biggest outcomes from that was actually the use of this confidential information in phishing campaigns. And, because this is, you have to think about this as, okay, sensitive data is out there. Yes, obviously we don't want that. But if people know that you're suffering through medical conditions, if they know schedules of medications or of hospital visits, this is all information that sophisticated attackers can use to basically, conduct phishing campaigns and target victims even further. So sensitive data is just it's such a big topic in the healthcare space, because it's more than just the data being exposed. It's really what these nefarious actors are doing with it, and quite scary. And targeting, and targeting people that may be going through health events themselves that it's the last thing that really anyone would want.
And then you've got the reputational loss, right, to the healthcare vendor themselves. So it's not obviously the patients are being impacted, but the healthcare vendor themselves is having massive reputational loss when one of these events actually occur. And all the compliance and legal pieces that go around that as well create severe financial penalties potentially.
I think this touches on both a really hard challenge, the fact that cybersecurity is so much of a shared responsibility across an entire organization. It's impossible to put a security team and solely rely on the security team to prevent all phishing across the organization when there's real people who are kind of on the front lines. But then I think it also presents a real opportunity that I'm excited to see further within healthcare of how do we then start to bring, if it's going to be a shared responsibility, both in terms of what can get in, how do we make it a shared responsibility to help what can get out? And I think there's some real opportunities, both in terms of healthcare, but then in a conversation about data in terms of how you start to put together permissions and everything else to further bolster up those front lines in both directions.
Okay, so Eldad, you were mentioning data enablement before. So what are some of the trends that you're seeing with health tech companies you're working with when it comes to data enablement, to making data accessible to the employees of the companies and other vendors and such? Yeah,
I think this is a really important question for everyone, because that's eventually what's driving these businesses, and everything is it's a direct impact of that. Healthcare companies are not founded to do cybersecurity, founded to do healthcare, and just understanding that is important. I will say a disclaimer that we're a bit biased because we're working with like super innovative companies, both from a data and AI perspective, and also how to think about a problem. But I guess the industry as a whole would want to be there. So I'll share a few examples. I think the companies or the company we work with and the trends we're seeing is again going back to my previous comment, is trying to break that trade-off between productivity and operational efficiency and security, trying to think about ways of how can they achieve their business goals, but also improve their security posture. And one of the things, Mollie, you mentioned, getting an agreement of what goes in and what goes out as well. It's really this notion of how you can achieve both, and it's tied to not a security control they're adding, but actually how they think about enabling their employees. And what I mean is one of the issues that they have around data, like if I want to be a bit technical for a second, is permissions. Like we want to have people with permissions to data to only what they need when they need it. That's super hard, right? You have identities scattered around on 3 different systems. You have like a gazillion of databases and platforms and devices, and how do you actually do that? And that's where, exactly at that point, this is a critical point, that's where we see the innovation. So we're seeing companies investing a lot in automation, making sure that if you're an employee in a company, you need to make a decision, you're building a new product, you're going to have the data available for you immediately. So you can do your job, but then building in the framework of making that a secure experience that is compliant. And I think, compliance is one thing, really making sure that the purpose behind accessing the data, the way the data is being used, is going to be legit, and putting that framework. Obviously, it's good, like you reduce attack surface, everyone gets access to data they need, it's an enabler, but there's something around the internal dynamics that's really interesting. Again, going back to Mollie's comment about shared responsibility, when the organization feels that there's a better way to do something that's also secure, they're gonna gravitate towards that, and we've seen that being almost contagious. So, I mean, the healthcare context, maybe not the right term, but it is like different teams are exposed to this accelerate data and analytics experience that's also secure, and then adopt that. So I think that is, again, from our perspective, working with our more innovative clients, this acceleration of data and AI through enabling secure access in an easy way is one of the trends we're seeing, and really it's tied to a lot of automation and integration into the internal systems.
We recently did some research on is there any correlation between the number of tools that you're actually using for security and the number of breaches that you actually have. And we got some really fascinating results from that. Because you would think, right, more tools, you're going to be more safe. There's actually the exact reverse correlation. The more tools you have, the more breaches you have. And as we kind of dug into that, what we found was that a lot of people think that they can just buy a tool and it'll solve the problem. But it's not that simple, right? It's about the kind of understanding of the problem, the implementation of whatever solution you come up with. It's the training and ongoing training of the people that are maintaining those tools and processes. So it's not a matter of just buying something to solve the problem. It's a lot more complex than that.
Ashley's going to put us all out of a job. These are secrets you're sharing.
And we're a tool vendor, right? But it's true. You got to use the products, whatever solutions you come up with properly. And if you've got a lot of them, you're probably not doing that. So there's going to be said for simplification. It often can actually help make you more secure.
And sometimes you have, like, in the same organization, 3 different business units buying their own tool. That could result in multiple tools, and that obviously goes against like what you want to do with security. So that actually makes sense.
Right. Mackensie, I want to put you in a tight spot. So I'm going to ask you a question, and sorry for that, but it's the classic security versus compliance question in the healthcare space. Is HIPAA enough? Like, if you meet HIPAA, are you golden as a healthcare org?
Yeah, I don't think anyone's going to be surprised that my answer is going to be no, but I want to nuance it for a little bit, because I'm really not against compliance. I'm very much for compliance. One of the great things about HIPAA, you can insert with whatever compliance certifications that you're looking for and you need to meet, is that when you're dealing in compliance and you're working with vendors that deal in the same compliances, there's certain boxes that you can tick that are verified by third parties, that the language everyone understands. That's great, because I hate having conversations where we expect everyone to be cybersecurity experts. When your passion is healthcare, then I don't think that you should be expected to understand how asymmetric encryption works and if data is being encrypted appropriately in transit and at rest. So that's what I love about compliance, is that you can move forward quickly, and that you can also weed out some of the risks quickly and progress and actually enable some innovation in areas like that. But is HIPAA enough? Definitely not, in my opinion. And I think there's a couple of things to understand about this from the organizational point of view, is that one of the things that certifications like HIPAA are really focused on is your client data, or your users' data, or your patient's data. That's one of the core focuses, is making sure that the data is safe and secure. What it's not looking at is your reputational damage, and it's not looking at kind of the follow-on consequences that can be from that. That's a whole nother conversation, an area that organizations need to go down, is that perhaps you don't have a breach where your patient data is exposed or extractable, but perhaps you've had other circumstances that have caused different kinds of damages that would have been avoidable. So no, like the short answer is no, it's not enough. But if you don't have the compliance, then get the compliance, because the compliance should be the minimum. And I'm a fan of kind of more compliance and more appropriate compliance. Other people may fight me on this, and that's okay. But that's kind of where I stand, is that it should be considered a minimal level, and it should kind of enable us to move quickly through it. And I really believe that the more the experts in these fields can create these tick boxes, these minimum standards to meet, then the more that people can focus on what they want to do, which is providing great healthcare. So, I mean, I'm curious to see if anyone else wants to challenge me on this. You're welcome to. I'm ready.
I do feel like compliance can get a bad rep. And to your point, it can be an enabler, in that it can be the thing that helps drive those minimum levels of security within an organization. And I think one thing to remember is that we're all on the same team, whether we're vendors or healthcare providers, because what we all want the organization to be secure. And that can sometimes mean educating the board, educating the CFO, and compliance is a really good tool to do that, and being able to help get the funding for those types of minimal measures. Some of the examples that I've seen where it can hold, maybe not organizations back, but take something like patching, and maybe there's a regulation out there in some industries where it's like, oh, you got to patch your devices within 30 days of a patch being released. Well, that's pretty good. And for the light bulb that is not connected to anything, yeah, sure, wait 30 days. But I've heard from some organizations say to me, yeah, but we, for the really critical stuff, we could do it in faster, but just the way we've set up our processes, everything kind of reverts to a norm and converges to one timeline, and it's harder to put in it. It's harder then sometimes to break away from that and have a standardized way of approaching it, but also be a little bit more risk-based and say, okay, for these devices, we're going to do 5, for these, we're going to do 30. They're all going to be compliant, but hey, we've adjusted it for our organization and for what our tolerance is. And that's much harder to do in practice than it is just to say it, but it is where I think compliance can fall short.
For sure. And to your point there, you certainly see the situations where the conversation at the boardroom is like, no, but it meets HIPAA. Like, we're not going to put more, we've met the thing, we have the tick. We don't want to add more funding to this thing that's not critical in our goal of providing great healthcare. So I can definitely see where it falls short there. And I think that's just kind of about understanding that this isn't a tick to say that you're all good. This is a tick to say that you're at the minimum level, that you're insurable, and that, in certain cases you're operable, that you can move forward. But we need to aim higher. But I can certainly see it from both points, and I totally get it.
So I'd just like to add that I've mainly stayed out of being in charge of compliance throughout.
You're a smart man.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe I made some wrong choices, but speaking with some people who that's their job, they're facing compliance on a continuous basis. One tip that was I saw that as very smart is not wait for an audit. Do not just prepare for an audit. Be continuously compliant. Don't just start, a rush of a month of getting everything in place. Don't build yourself to be in a position where in any single moment, 3 a.m., the auditor will knock on your door, and make sure that you're always there to save yourself from, lots of unplanned projects around it and so on. Okay, so I want us to converge to one last question to all of you, and this is about 2023. In this year, there's the financial crisis, and many organizations, including healthcare, either has reductions in force or they're not getting additional headcounts, not all of them, of course. Budgets are harder to allocate, and so on. So, you know, it's an interesting time. And I'd like to hear some examples that you're facing of organizations that reduce their cyber risks while still maintaining costs, or while living in 2023. Let's start with Mollie.
Yes, it is quite, we're hearing from a lot of organizations that tough year for healthcare. And I think some of the best scenarios I've heard is where the security leader has said to me their budget has stayed the same. And that is a good outcome. I think there's a handful though for everywhere else that is saying, hey, I'm expected to do more with less. And for that, you know, the biggest things that we've seen for organizations to be able to go after the fact that the security landscape is only getting more complex and only getting sort of more in volume is being able to use automation and help that be a force multiplier across the team that they have and the resources that they have. So, you know, some examples of that can be, you know, using automation to keep, you know, update data fields for you that otherwise would have done manually, coordination between different teams, like letting facilities know about a certain thing that's changed in your environment that you otherwise would have done via an email. Those all sound like maybe small things that can really add up and give time back to the team that you have. So that's the biggest one that I've seen, and automation has come up, and maybe even you mentioned automation. So I'd be curious if people have other, you know, what other things they're seeing beyond automation as a force multiplier for teams.
I can go. I think I would start with just looking at the big picture. So yes, I mean, there's less budgets and there's less people, but when you go to the top, to the CEO, they're having the same problem. They have like audacious, you know, goals. As much as they could cut back from their projections last year when it was more optimistic to this year, but you know, they have the pressure, and they're still looking at making a lot of revenue and growth this year. And as much as you can be an enabler for that, and maybe the budget isn't the security team, it's with the line of business. So like what I'm trying to say is maybe two things. Like this type of environment is a catalyst for innovation. When you have constraints, that's where you have innovation. So that's number one. And number two, it's, you know, the companies still want to grow. And that's where kind of I start from. I think operational efficiency, like Mollie mentioned, automation is really an important factor. But I think every company has its own tie into the business. I think it's becoming more and more common where cybersecurity companies are attaching to like a higher level business value than just reducing risk, or I'm not saying reducing risk is not a higher level business value, but additional, more enabling revenue generating net positive outcomes for the company. I believe those are still there. It could be automation, it could be data enablement, it could be something else. I'm very happy to see that as an industry, we're not, you know, our main topics of discussions are not the new threat attack vector that this economy has brought, but actually how we're enabling the business. I think that talks a lot about the maturity of the cybersecurity industry, which I love. I've been here for many, many years as well. But yeah, that's kind of my perspective on this.
I guess, you know,
I would add. Sorry,
go for it, Ashley. No, go for it, Ashley. Go for it.
Yeah, well, I would agree with both of the previous two panelists around automation. I think that's absolutely key. The more that you can automate, the more you can do with the same or less resources, right? So in the case of endpoint security for us, it's vital that you're able to create workflows and playbooks and be able to actually automate the majority of the operation, so you don't actually have to have kind of live on hands kind of on keyboards to actually do things. And I guess to my point earlier around consolidation, I think is the other thing. If you can audit what you have already, many of the tools you have today, I'm sure are great. You can continue using them. There may be opportunity to consolidate some of the tools that you have today down to a single tool and reduce spend that way as well. And then with less tools, you can probably use them more effectively.
Yeah, I don't really have much more to add. I think we're all tuning the same kind of the same horn here, is that it's very important that we consolidate everything down as much as possible without reducing any of the risks that we have. But the one area that I would like to add too is that there is a lot of opportunity to grow out there in tough times. That's always true, and a great strategy for growth is to have a solid foundation of security. If you can build forward confidently, move quickly with the knowledge that your data is secure, that you've met more than the minimum standards, and that security is taken care of because you have great tool, well-trained team, and it's concise so that everyone has visibility in a narrow area, then that gives you opportunity to grow and take advantage of the opportunities where that meet. And I think that, combined with what everyone else said, is where a lot of organizations will prevail in what probably will be and has been a bit of a tough year.
Yeah, and I've seen that, by the way, in many companies where security becomes such an important part of selling. That having to explain why things work in a certain way, or why you do not have a certain control over part of your SDLC or part of your data, and so on, can be an inhibitor of sales. So that's very important. So we have automation. And we need to make security an enabler, and help the business grow with security, and also consolidation, Ashley. So, folks, this was a really interesting discussion. It's also recorded, so we will share the recording. I'd like to thank you all for sharing this time with me and with us. Well, we'll see you around in our industry, right? Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.